Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Nikki, for inviting me today. As a very proud P&G alum, I feel very, very privileged to be able to talk to you all today at this fabulous conference around the world about a better world. As Nikki said, I work for the United Nations Global Compact, and so she asked me if I could illustrate what might be a better world. Well, I thought about it, and you ask people, a number of questions come up. Is it a healthy planet? Peace and justice for all? Prosperity? Decent jobs for everyone? Health for everyone? And essentially a world where no one is left behind. That is definitely the world that we're looking for. And we do know that this has been defined by experts who've worked exactly how we should achieve it. And that's illustrated in the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. They're 17 time-bound goals with specific targets that if we could achieve by 2030, we will create the world that we all want to live in. These are essentially the world's KPIs, and they're certainly my KPIs in the work that I do every day. So the question is, are we getting there? What's the progress like? So I thought I'd share a few indicators, and then we can see how progress is being made. The first one, obviously, on all of our newsreels and our thoughts at the moment is climate. How are we doing towards trying to reach a 1.5 degree warming scenario by the end of the century? Well, we're tracking towards 3 degrees today. There is certainly progress, and we've seen a lot of that in the last couple of weeks, but we do need to keep our eyes on the prize. Let's look at water. Today, 74% of the global population is using safely managed drinking water services, which is great. That's up from 70% 5 years ago, so we are definitely making progress. But there are still 2 billion people in the world who lack safely managed drinking water. So still progress to be made. How about oceans? Well, the good news is that the extent of marine protected areas has increased significantly in the last 10 years. It's up from 28% to 44% of key biodiversity areas. They're now protected. But we still have 700 dead zones. Those are areas where there's not enough oxygen in the oceans to secure life. And that's doubled in the last 10 years. So we're increasing our protection, but we still have this issue of dead zones, and that's largely a result of climate crisis. So now, what about people? What about livelihoods? Today, 19% of the world's workers are working poor. We need to fix that, and 160 million children are in child labor. Now, this is an interesting point to think about in terms of COVID. We know we've lost 9% of the world's working hours, which has actually put 31 million people into poverty, into extreme poverty. Hopefully that's a glitch, but it's an important point because it's the first time in decades that the percentage of people in poverty has gone up. We've made so much progress, but with COVID we've moved in the wrong direction. And point to be made, for every percentage point increase in poverty, we will see a 0.7% increase in child labor. So this issue will change. Child labor is literally a poverty issue. What about gender? Many of you will recognize this statistic from the World Economic Forum. It will take 268 years to close the economic gender gap if we carry on at the current pace. Pre-COVID, that was 257, not great, but better, and it shows that we've moved backwards in the gender progress, and that's because female jobs have been more hit than male jobs. The expectation is that after COVID, we will be less 13 million jobs, the women's jobs, but men's jobs will get back to pre-COVID terms. So obviously, the COVID has had another impact on gender. And of course, corruption is costing us $2 trillion in dollar terms, not to mention stability and peace terms. So what about the business contribution? Because I work at the UN Global Compact, that is the UN's corporate sustainability initiative, this is where I have a bit of expertise. I'm going to share some data from our annual report and from CEO survey that we've recently done. It covers the Global Compact companies. It's not a global number, but it gives you some understanding of progress that is being made. Firstly, there is hugely growing awareness. 86% of CEOs recognize that our global economic systems need to refocus on equitable growth. And 3 out of 4 CEOs say that they see the pressure to act on sustainability and that it will increase significantly over the next 3 years. Now, that number goes up and up every year. And the interesting point here is that the pressure is coming from customers, consumers, and investors. And this, I see this data every year. This is a changing one. The investors have gone up dramatically in the last few years. It used to be governments. They're not so relevant anymore. It's the marketplace. So what we see is increasing amount of commitments. 88% of global compact companies are taking some action on the Sustainable Development Goals, and these are the goals that most companies are acting on. Decent work, and economic growth clearly. 94% of companies have policies and activities in place to address labor issues. Climate action, 69% of global compacts have some form of emission target. Not necessarily big enough, but some form. Health and well-being, gender. 60% of the companies have targeted over 30%, between 30 and 50% women's representation at leadership level. And also responsible supply chains, which we will see later is the hardest thing to achieve. So lots of progress. And what about COVID? It's really underpinned the drive to sustainable progress. The stories that we hear of strength, innovation, resilience have made sustainability really real in a lot of companies. So 70% of CEOs say that it's increased the importance of corporate responsibility, and nearly 80% saying that it's highlighted the need to move to a more sustainable business models. And we know that 45% of CEOs say they've actually adopted more ambitious targets due to the pandemic. So it's definitely having a positive impact on our plans. We know that supply chains have been dramatically impacted, and half of companies surveyed say that supply chain sustainability has grown in importance since the pandemic, and 63% of companies are taking renewed action. About 60% now on corruption even, right through the supply chains, now have a zero tolerance policy. So that's progress being made. So now I thought I'll give you a bit of an idea of some of the specifics that are actually happening and the plans that are being put in place to move towards the 2030 ambition. Water, let's look at water. The Water Resilience Coalition is a group of companies. They have a roadmap to get to 2030, and it will accelerate collective action to achieve better, more resilient water outcomes in 100 basins that support 3 billion people. So that's real progress. They will also implement net positive water plans to enable water, sanitation, and hygiene to reach 100 million people. So it should help address some of the water issues. What about climate? Getting to 1.5. I mentioned before that 69% of companies in the Global Compact have some form of emission target, but 60% of them, about 59%, admit that that's not necessarily in line with the 1.5. So still more ambition to be made. And it's hard to scale it. It's not getting right across supply chains. 92% of the large companies of revenue over 1 billion have targets, but only 58% of SMEs. So we need to scale this somehow. But we are getting there. There are over 2,000 companies now signed up to science-based targets, so they're going to have their plans ratified by science. And over 1,000 have signed up to the 1.5-degree plan, which is great. And in terms of scaling it, as the Science Based Targets Initiative and all of us move towards a net zero standard, we have a climate ambition accelerator that helps SMEs and companies new to the issue plan and put these plans in place. So that's good progress. And what about oceans? I mentioned the dead zone issue earlier on. Well, a lot of businesses in the Oceans Coalition are looking at ways that they can address the issues and also address climate and take climate actions. These businesses are looking at all the things that we can do in terms of oceans business, like offshore renewable energy, sustainable aquatic food systems, nature-based solutions like restoring mangroves, seaweed, seagrass ecosystems, all that can help address those dead zones that I mentioned before and contribute to meeting climate goals. They are using blue bonds to finance this, and there's a clear business blue path towards addressing climate goals. Now, as we look at achieving these environmental targets, we're going to see, we estimate, 30 million new jobs in renewable energy and grow, but we're going to lose around 5 million jobs in oil, gas, and coal. So the fact is that as we transition to this new green economy, we have to make sure that the jobs are fair, equitable, and that we're helping effective communities during this transition. We have a business transition think lab working on this at the moment. So thinking about leaving no one behind and decent jobs, how are we doing now, even before the transition? There's a couple of things to look at. Living wage. In the Global Compact, 70% of companies are ensuring a living wage to all their employees, but only 20% are able to ensure that that happens right across the supply chain. So this is the difficult thing, and 43% of them are recognizing that there are systemic inequalities in their supply chains. It's clearly the hardest thing just to get right. That's what we need to be focusing on now. Today's companies are definitely promising a more diverse and inclusive future, which is great, and 81% of CEOs have instituted procedures to fully eliminate racism throughout their organizations, and 76% of them are targeting representative workforces. But only 42% say that their leadership is accountable to these diversity and inclusion targets. So still a little bit more to do. How about gender? Well, good progress again. You saw the numbers before. COVID has impacted that, but still more to do. There are 5,500 companies who have signed the Women's Empowerment Principles, which is great. 10 years ago, there were 40. So there is good progress. And the good news is half of that are small businesses, so the scale is beginning to happen in this space. But only 34% of them have organizational-wide, time-bound targets in their strategies, which we know is what it takes to really deliver gender equality throughout an organization. So still more to do. And what about financing? Well, the CFO task force is a group of, I think, about 60 CFOs right now, are targeting to have 1,000, and they will, if 50% of them will, if they will have 50% of their corporate finance linked to Sustainable Development Goals investment, that will deliver a good shift in investment towards the delivering of the Sustainable Development Goals. Should be about 500 billion. So that's a good scale goal as well that this group of CFOs have put in place. So I hope I've shown you that there is a lot of activity, there is a lot of ambition, and there is a lot of progress. But if we want to reach the goals and targets, the KPIs I mentioned at the beginning, the world does need more. In two ways. We do need higher ambition. I think I've mentioned to you a lot of progress and a lot of goals that have been set, but the reality is that in the Global Compact, 39% of the companies admit that their goals are actually aligned to the societal needs. So we probably need a little bit more, higher ambition, 1.5 degree targets on climate. And half of CEOs say that extending through the supply chain is the main barrier. So we need more scale. And like anything, delivering any target, as you get closer, it gets harder. We need to double down. So we need more. We need to raise our ambition and need to work on the scale, which is really tricky. But if we do, that's the way that we can all create a better world, the world that we all want to live in. Thank you.